So hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is a story about what if Naruto was neglected by his family and adopted by Ichigo. Part 3. If you guys enjoy this, what if? And you want the next part of this video? Comment down below. And let me know before I start. Please do support for more awesome content. And leave a like and don't forget to subscribe to my channel. And also share this video with your friends. And check out the description. And check out my playlist. So let's start the video. Chapter 11. Once the shinobi from Sunagakur had determined that Naruto was the winner, Genma stepped forward and waited a few minutes for the crowd to calm down. Seeing as the adrenaline from the fight had passed, Genma cleared his throat before addressing the crowd. There will now be a period of an hour that the fighters can use to recover before we go into the semi-final round. There were a few groans from the arena, but then the audience quickly used the intermission to rush to find food and drink. Genma glanced to his left where Naruto was still standing there stoically, he wasn't even showing fatigue. Genma shrugged before walking off the field, leaving Naruto and Susei still standing there silently. Naruto moved towards one of the trees and sat down at the base, making use of the shade provided by the vegetation on the tree. Susei took the time to fly into the tree and get out of the sunlight which her black feathers absorbed. Naruto closed his eyes and allowed himself to rest against the tree before the next fight. Gaara from the booth stared down at Naruto with intrigue in his eyes, but the auburn-haired boy remained in the booth, keeping his distance like he had all of his life. He had seen how the tournament would play out, and Naruto knew that he had 2 more fights to win just to see how far he had come. Now Naruto was not expecting to beat a full-fledged Jounin-level shinobi, but the remaining genin would provide him a challenge he desperately needed, dare he say craved. Taking a deep breath, Naruto calmed himself because neither of those fights were now but in an hour's time. His first fight was against Yuna, who proved to be something novel, at least to Naruto she was. Her ability to meld her 2 genetically inherited skills into something new gave Naruto an opportunity to test himself. Then there was Gaara, a shinobi thought to be nothing but the epitome of a mindless killing machine, or as he saw it, a prime example of a shinobi. The Redeed from Suna touted an impressive defensive combination that could provide a problem to a lesser shinobi, where not even luck could save them. Then there was the off chance he would willingly give his body to the residing inside of his body. Yet what really caught the eye of the son of the yellow flash was the sand inside of Gaara's gourd. With his Sharingan active, Naruto was able to pick up something from it but would need a better chance to inspect it, a fight. Naruto stopped himself there because looking up at the video board, it would seem that it was determined that he and Yuna would fight before that. No matter how much he believed in himself, Naruto would not risk overlooking an opponent with the potential to do harm such as Yuna. She had the water release and poison release which he could counter with the fire and wind releases respectively. The acid release though gave Naruto pause as he wondered if his fire would be hot enough to evaporate the liquid-based ninjutsu. Letting out a small sigh, Naruto ran his hand through his raven-colored locks, he always hated question marks. Meanwhile, up in the cage booth, the 5 village leaders were going over the profiles of the other combatants and marking down what they believed to be weak and strong points to pass down to the judges. Even with them being the strongest shinobi, their opinion alone still did not make it Chunin, it also took the opinion of judges from the lesser countries. The Kazekage, who had just passed his ballot, took this moment to speak. Now we have one from Konoha, Iwa, and Suna each. The Kazekage seemed pleased with the outcome since both his village and his ally could possibly take the final match, only increasing their business. Mei, hearing her peer's words, frowned slightly before letting a small smile come across her face as she took the bright side of things. It was true that Kiri didn't have a combatant in the final 3, but she had 2 shinobi who had made it plenty far in the tournament, each showcasing outstanding qualities that would garner them a promotion. Inoki let a small gnomish grin come across his wrinkled face as he looked at the Reikage, obviously getting ready to do some classic rubbing your face in it. Well, Reikage Dono, who do you think will come out victorious in the end? Inoki asked cheekily, knowing just how annoyed he was at not having any shinobi in the contest. Reikage's hand clenched slightly and his brow started to twitch dangerously as Inoki took his shots at him, which he usually did. Call me petty, but I don't care all that much who wins the damn tournament now that my shinobi have been eliminated. I'm only here to keep an eye on potential enemies and the ceremony tomorrow. The Reikage admitted without even a hint of shame as he looked at Naruto sitting patiently in the field. That is the one I need to be watching. The winner of this next match won't stand a chance against Gaara. 1, they will be tired from doing battle beforehand, and 2nd, Gaara has been groomed to become the perfect shinobi. He won't lose. The 4th Wind Shadow stated confidently, ignoring the fact that Gaara had already almost lost it once. Now Kazekage Dono, do I need to remind you that aside from the minor injuries that Chijiro had gotten on Naruto, no one has really pushed him to show anything all that powerful. Minato added in, taking pride in his son's ability with seals and ninjutsu, knowing he had always been hiding things. In the stands, I wonder how Nai-san will deal with Yunasen's acid release. That stuff is really nasty. Naomi muttered with a small frown, remembering how the green liquid had eaten through her shinobi sandal. Now she was sure that Yuna would be using that more now that she was only one fight from the finals. I am not sure, but if I had managed to dodge that attack instead of hoping to hit Haku first, then Naruto-kun wouldn't have to deal with a fresh Gaara. Narumi muttered with a frown as her shoulders slumped down in self-depreciation. The blonde looked up when she felt a hand resting on her shoulder. Don't worry about Narumi-chan because there is nothing we can do about it now. All we can do is cheer on Naruto-kun and watch as he kicks some ass. Kushina finished with a small grin, getting matching grins from her two daughters who nodded resolutely. With their resolve reaffirmed, the three family members readied themselves to cheer for their pick. Lee was looking down towards the stadium with a barely contained excitement, which was an expression mirrored by his mentor, Guy. Yosh, I shall give my all in cheering on my fellow Leaf Shinobi. Lee shouted out energetically, ignoring the ashamed looks coming from Tenten and to a lesser degree Niji. Very good, Lee, let your flames carry your comrade to a glorious victory, and I too shall lend my flames. Guy said with the traditional good guy pose, getting an approving and slightly frantic nod from his chibi. Kakashi looked over to Guy with a blank expression, something Guy noticed, but when he looked Kakashi was already back to being aloof. Ignoring how Guy was cursing his supposed cool, hip attitude, Kakashi looked down back at the field where both Naruto and Yuna were standing. The copy nin was watching both of them with the eyes of a hawk, but with even more intensity when it came to his sensei's son. He was definitely the most enigmatic shinobi the Leaf had in her service, even more so than Kakashi himself had to admit. Combat field. Yuna fidgeted slightly, not even getting into a combat stance, even after Genma's permission to start. Naruto, who was curious as to why Yuna seemed so reserved, had not moved in any meaningful fashion either, simply choosing to wait for Yuna to get over whatever mental block that was plaguing her. The Iwa Kunoichi glanced up to see Naruto looking at her curiously, swallowing the lump in her throat, she glanced into Naruto's Sharingan eyes. Gaining the courage she needed, the diver wearing Kunoichi's helmet spoke up. And Naruto-sen, I know this might be a little startling and all, but I would like to. Naruto, who was now just as confused as the rest of the people in the arena, arched one of his eyebrows. He had absolutely no idea where this was going, but it had to be important if Yuna was going out of her way to make a point of it. Naruto was also left wondering why everyone always had to be so timid around him. Then again, Naruto did admit to himself that he enjoyed watching people scurry around him, something the Kyuubi apparently found funny, if the loud snort was any indication. What would you like to do? Naruto asked, hoping to get the conversation going. Naruto felt something twist in his stomach when he saw the blush spread across the cheeks of his female opponent. Yuna, who saw the look Naruto was shooting her way, managed a weak smile as the heat in her cheeks only seemed to intensify. Taking a deep breath, Yuna looked back at Naruto with only a light dusting of pink on her cheeks. I'd like to get to know you better after this tournament. Yuna's request that started off quiet ended up being a small but sudden yell. The stadium was left deathly quiet as they looked down at the two shinobi, who had seemed to have forgotten about the Chunin exams altogether. Up in the cage booth, Minato and Inoki were both looking down at the scene playing out with disbelief. The villages of Konohagakure and Iwagakure were supposed to be the worst of enemies after Minato's feats, but yet there was an offer of a date, it was unbelievable. Naruto stared at Yuna with no emotion clear on his face, getting the Kunoichi who just put herself out there to him to become nervous. Naruto started to think on what Yuna was proposing, and he would admit that maybe he should accept said offer. After all, it couldn't hurt to partake in the date, but I don't see why not, Yuna. Naruto started getting a bright smile in return from his soon-to-be opponent. But you need to prove yourself to be a true Kunoichi in our fight, and then I'll say yes. Got that, Yuna-chan? Naruto ended with a teasing jab by accentuating the affectionate suffix often attached to a girl's name. Yuna's happy smile lasted a few more moments before giving way to an expression of extreme determination. Yuna didn't drop into a taijutsu stance, but she was ready to begin the fight. Naruto briefly wondered why she didn't wish to test him hand to hand, but then again maybe it was because Twilight was a looming reminder. The Tomo of Naruto's Sharingan spun around lazily as he eyed Yuna, ready for any sudden movement she might pull. Both fighters failed to notice that the stadium was still in a state of shock, and even those who knew Naruto were surprised that he agreed because he had shown very little in the way of interest towards the Kunoichi of the Hidden Leaf. Though in honesty that was because a frightening amount of them were nothing more than love-sick puppies and fangirls. Something every talented shinobi absolutely loathed. Naruto watched as Yuna created 3 Mizubunshin to stand in front of her, each with the expression of pure determination. A hail of shuriken flew through the open spaces between the clones, but each cluster was delayed after the one before. Naruto bobbed through the first cluster without any difficulty. The second came a moment later, in which Naruto responded by slapping the stars away with his katana in a fluid motion. Doing the same with the final barrage, Naruto glared down at Mizubunshin in front of him. Ducking the punch thrown by the water clone, Naruto drove the pommel of his katana through the clone's head. Watching as the clone dropped into a puddle of water, Naruto tightened his hand around the hilt of his katana, the charm from Narumi resting against the back of his hand. Spinning around, Naruto thrusted the edge of twilight straight through the heart of the second water clone, ignoring the splash of water that hit his face, sensing another clone running at him from behind. Trying to turn back, Naruto found himself slowed in the chakra-heavy water, and by the time he squared up with the clone, it had him in its embrace before locking into a water prison. Naruto's body then went up in a plume of smoke. Naruto moved out from behind the tree he was sitting in front of earlier with a blank expression in play as he regarded Yuna with stoicism. Seeing that her little ploy to use diversionary tactics failed to get past Naruto's discerning gaze, Yuna started to dip into her ninjutsu arsenal. Naruto gazed on as her cheeks started to puff out. Water release. Sticky water bullets. 3 bullets of water shot from Yuna's mouth, one on the left, one on the right and another going down the center. Naruto realized that Yuna had created this formation to keep him funneled in the path of the centermost bullet of water. Naruto smirked at the clever but simple tactic. Seeing no other choice, Naruto slashed through the bullet that was trying to take his head off of his shoulders. The blade sunk into the bullet, but Naruto found he couldn't cleave through the glob of water. Naruto cursed quietly as he was forced to release his katana as the bullet collected the sword and stuck it to the far wall of the arena. The high viscosity of the bullet managed to cancel out the katana's cutting power, yet if Naruto had applied a small amount of wind chakra the problem could have been avoided. Naruto caught a fist Yuna threw at him with no difficulty, but was forced to let go so that he could avoid the leg sweep from his opponent. Using the falling momentum gifted to him by gravity, Naruto attempted to drop a falling heel onto Yuna's right shoulder. Yuna used her forearms to block the attack as well as to flip Naruto over. Not panicking, Naruto gracefully fixed himself while in freefall. Naruto glanced down when he felt his vest being cut into by a sharp object over his gut. Thankfully the chain mesh kept the kunai from cutting into the skin or worse, providing an internal injury. Intent to kill, that is promising. Naruto mused loud enough for Yuna to hear the praise he was giving her. Lashing upwards, Naruto kicked Yuna's hand clutching the kunai, sending it upwards following the trajectory of the kick. Yuna yelped in pain and gripped her hand, trying to stop the throbbing pain that originated in her hand. Crouching down in the middle of a spin, Naruto delivered a devastating elbow to Yuna's gut, causing the kunoichi to gasp in pain. Following his attack, Naruto rose back to a standing base, but Yuna was already bringing her helmet forth to bash against Naruto's head. Naruto blocked the helmet with both of his hands, but grimaced when he felt Yuna drive her knee into his stomach. His body moved naturally as he slouched forward, letting Yuna kick him dead in the chest, knocking him backwards. Naruto rolled to lessen the impact before springing back to his feet to keep Yuna from attacking him while he was prone. Naruto rubbed his chest. The taijutsu taught to him by Mihik didn't make use of the Sharingan's ability to determine trajectory, so Naruto often stayed away from it, and that was why. Avoiding hits was always better than taking them and hoping you could get back up because there was always the chance that he could possibly not be able to stand any longer. Inhaling, Naruto flashed through his hand signs ending in the familiar tiger hand sign. Naruto's lungs started to burn. Fire release. Grand Fireball. A large compressed sphere of fire sped forward towards Yuna with intent to harm. Yuna, who was aware of the hand signs Naruto was using, had already countered by firing 2 water bullets at the sphere of fire. The resulting collision bathed the field in a steam. Naruto stood there as the steam swallowed him up, not bothering to avoid it since the seals on his clothing drastically lowered the effects of elemental damage or wear. Then the steam around Naruto started to swirl and gathered into one point on his palm. The air started to compress and swirl around on top of Naruto's palm to the point that the winds became visible. The steam soon was funneled out of the field and into the air, but before it could finish, Naruto aimed his palm and the sphere fired off into the field of mist. Just as the last signs of the steam cleared up, the arena watched as the sphere flung through the air and hit the unaware Yuna straight in the stomach, getting the kunoichi from Tsuchi no Kuni to cry out. The crowd gasped seeing the kunoichi getting hit by such a fearsome attack, but then her body turned into a green liquid that splattered on the ground. Naruto guessed that it was an acid clone and waited for Yuna to reveal herself. Naruto ran to his left, getting the crowd's attention as they too were looking around for Konoha's demon's foe for this round. Just when the crowd was ready to pass it off as a futile movement, a drill of acid hit where Naruto's heels were just 2 paces ago. Naruto glanced over his shoulder and saw Yuna holding the hair hand sign. Water release. Violent water wave. Naruto hopped into a tree as the wave from Yuna pushed the liquid from the acid-based technique at force behind the watery wave, uprooted the tree, and washed it towards the stadium wall as the acid remains in the water started to eat through the bark of the tree. Creating a shadow clone, Naruto gave it a silent command before leaping off of the tree sticking to the wall. Naruto watched as his cage bunchen started to glow. A moment later the clone exploded, creating a large crater in the stadium field. The water soon flowed into the large hole containing the acid to that spot. Yuna glanced towards the hole that contained her wave of water-infused acid with a small frown before glancing up at Naruto, who had just released a larger shuriken. Thinking nothing of the larger equipment, Yuna shuffled to the side, making sure the projectile sailed harmlessly to the side. A plume of smoke caught Yuna's eye, and her body tensed when the large shuriken changed into a copy of Naruto. The transformed shadow clone started to glow faintly, getting the Kunoichi's eyes to widen. Yuna cursed knowing what was going to happen, but being unable to prevent it. The great clone explosion went off right next to Yuna, getting her body to propel outwards like a human projectile. Naruto dropped back onto the ground, looking on coldly at the spot that Yuna landed. The stoic Naruto cracked a small smile when he saw that Yuna was beginning to stir. It would have been a shame if she was finished by a medium-quality explosion like the one his shadow clone produced. Yuna now recovered enough from the jarring explosion to stand and glare defiantly at Naruto, obviously not wishing to lose to him. Her helmet was no more than a few pieces that were littered around her on the ground, leaving her black hair to flow with the slight breeze that had been blowing all throughout the day. Naruto glanced at Yuna in her entirety and shot her a small grin. "You know, that helmet of yours really doesn't do you any justice. Why not show that pretty face of yours?" Naruto complimented Yuna, enjoying the slight flush that came to her cheeks from his praise. "Well, I'll keep that in mind for the date that I still have to win." Yuna replied with a small smile, seemingly not recognizing her own words. Naruto tilted his head to the side with a mock expression of befuddlement, which coupled with his Sharingan, gave it a very odd appearance. Blinking a few times, Naruto pursed his lips. "So you do want a date then?" Naruto asked with his head tilting to the other side with a questioning expression on his face. Yet inwardly Naruto was grinning since he loved playing mind games with his opponents, much like his sensei, Itachi. Naruto was glad that Yuna didn't use the word date before because it gave him ammunition for his little game. Yuna's glared at Naruto even harder, but the amount of intimidation in the heated glare was cut in half by the blush that adorned her cheeks. Shut up and fight." Yuna growled, going through a complex series of signs faster than she was earlier. Naruto's cursed eyes took in the sight of a large green dragon spinning around Yuna before glaring at him, much like its master was doing. This dragon though was different from the dragons used in the competition thus far. Unlike the dragons before that were more along the veins of a reptile, this dragon took more after an Eastern Hemisphere perspective of a dragon. Acid release. Fury of the Emerald Dragon. Then again, there is the downside of insulting your opponent. That of course is when their skills sharpen with their anger instead of becoming sloppy. Naruto groaned inwardly as he glanced at his surroundings. Seeing no way to be able to outrun the large acidic creature, Naruto started his own hand signs in a last-ditch effort to stop from being burnt by the acidic properties of Yuna's chakra. Holding the horse hand sign, Naruto began to knead his chakra as the dragon lunged towards him. Fire release. Majestic flame destroyer. Naruto breathed out his chakra, which took the form of fire. The thin jet of fire branched out into a wall of fire that engulfed the dragon's body before it could tear into Naruto. Naruto was disappointed by the scale of his despite it already being a formidable size. Naruto could see the steam rolling towards him, but he knew this steam would be poisonous to his body. Not wanting to give Yuna an advantage, Naruto used his high level of wind manipulation to funnel the steam out of the immediate vicinity. Naruto could see that Yuna was still holding her hand sign, despite how the intense flames of his destroyed it completely. "Try and survive this, Naruto, because I really want my reward." Acid release. Return of the Emerald Dragon. Naruto arched an eyebrow at Yuna, wondering what she was doing, forgetting that he was standing in front of the crater he made earlier in the fight. The same dragon from earlier rose from the watery depths, using every liquid ounce to sustain its form, before barreling into Naruto's unguarded back, getting the Sharingan-wielding shinobi to growl in pain as he felt the acidic qualities of the start to burn through the Chanmash he wore, and in just a few moments. In the stands, "Naruto Kunai-san," was the simultaneous shout from Kushina, Narumi, and Naomi as they watched on in worry as Naruto's body was knocked forward from the acid release users. Naomi clenched her fists, knowing just how dangerous that Yuna's moves could be after witnessing what they could do firsthand. They could see that both his vest and chainmesh were already being eaten through. They were glad though that Naruto's attire covered up pretty much all of his body. That is going to be painful. Why? Because I doubt even the most poisonous of the insect species could neutralize that acid. Shino added in with his own brand of logic that didn't do anything to calm down those worried for Naruto's safety, despite it being true. Kiba, who was seated next to Shino, grinned seeing Naruto take another hit but kept his mouth shut so that Naomi or Narumi didn't hear him. "The kid is in a tough spot." Asuma agreed with a small nod, wincing at the sight of Naruto's skin being burned through by the greenish liquid. The sight even got the chain smoker to pause his nasty habit in favor of watching the intense battle between two obviously capable genin, soon to be chunin. "It looks bad, but don't count out that troublesome guy just yet. He always seems to have a backup plan, even if it doesn't look like he has a plan in the first place." Shikamaru surmised confidently, getting a nod from his best friend, who also knew just how clever Naruto could be. The rest of the genin didn't look as confident but watched to see if Naruto would prove the Nara genius right. Combat field. Iubi, can you stop that acid from getting any deeper into my body where it will prove to be problematic? Naruto asked while glaring down Yuna, ignoring the searing pain that spread throughout the back of his body. He was already trying to layer a thin film of flames on the acid to burn it away, but it wasn't enough to stop the burning green liquid. Naruto realized just how truly deadly Yuna's could be with just a scratch. The Kyuubi, who was watching his container from behind his cage, gave a small snort when he heard Naruto's request for aid. Personally, the large chakra being saw no reason to help his container just because he got careless. Why would I help you just because you can't beat this human? Kyuubi asked, seeing if he could get his container to get angry and maybe lose control of those emotions he kept so closely guarded and out of its realm of manipulation. Naruto had to stop himself from making his groan audible because it seemed that this time of all the times the Kyuubi had decided to be stubborn. Not having enough time to argue with him, Naruto said the first thing that came to his mind. Fine, then when the world sees that the one tail has made further than the 9 tails and says that Shukaku is stronger than you, don't start complaining to me. Naruto retorted heatedly as he tried to think of another way to try and neutralize the acidic compound eating through his skin and soon to be eating through his bones and organs. Kyuubi lay there in silence as he watched Naruto gnash his teeth, trying to figure out he could overcome the acidic liquid that latched to his body. Snarling behind the bars, Kyuubi had made his decision. Fine, I will help you, you insolent whelp. However, if you get hit by any more of this acid, if you do, then even I will not be able to help you. The Kyuubi growled as his chakra began to heal the damage even faster than it could be done. Naruto let a small sigh come from his lips when he felt Kyuubi's regenerative properties influencing his body. Naruto had to resist the urge to roll his eyes at how Kyuubi seemed to manage to elevate his importance, no matter what he said. Ending his series of signs with the tiger, Naruto's cheeks expanded slightly. Fire release. Phoenix Age Fire. A series of 4 small fireballs were launched from Naruto's mouth, all targeting Yuna. Yuna scoffed at a feeble attempt at retaliation until she saw that Naruto was going through another quick, concise set of hand seals. Wind release. Great breakthrough. A strong gust of wind roared from behind Naruto and hit the small fireballs. The fire technique, now enhanced by the wind technique, became one large wall of fire instead of 4 tiny flame spheres. Yuna's eyes went wide at the collaboration technique that was now threatening to engulf her if she didn't react. Not wanting to end up as a burned shell of a human being, Yuna started up her counter technique. Water release. Water encampment wall. Yuna shouted out frantically, only breathing a sigh of relief when she heard the hiss of Naruto's fire release, hitting the water wall, protecting her from the fiery onslaught. Waiting a few moments to ensure that the fire was put out, Yuna then dropped the water wall. Yuna could see that Naruto continued to watch her keenly as she tried to hide her exhaustion from his prying eyes. Naruto meanwhile was having a small yet scolding talk with himself as Yuna glared competitively at him. If I knew any of the more powerful techniques for my lightning release, then her water release wouldn't be such a problem. I need to ask Mikoto-chan for some training after this. 3 Cage Bunshin formed in front of Naruto and exploded forward at the flat-footed Yuna. 1 clone took each side, forcing Yuna to create spears of water to dispose of them, leaving her open to the final clone's frontal assault. Knocking her into the air and getting her eyes to shut for a moment from the pain, the shadow clone reappeared above her, getting her focus back on it. Bringing her guard up, Yuna waited for an attack that didn't come. Yuna was broken from her confusion when she felt a sharp pain coming from her back. Naruto stood underneath the falling Yuna with his fist pointed upwards, but to the eyes of the Chunin-level shinobi, they could see Naruto emitting a constant stream of wind that was drilling into Yuna's back. Naruto cut the wind current, making Yuna resume her fall. Waiting for Yuna to almost hit the ground, Naruto timed his kick so that it smashed into her ribs just before she hit the ground. Yuna groaned in pain as her body was sent rolling across the ground from Naruto's strong, swift kick. Panting heavily, Yuna got back to her feet, but Naruto could see that her stance was shaky at best. I won't lose to him. Not after I have made so much progress. Yuna shouted at herself, desperate to call on her dwindling amount of chakra. In her sluggish haste, her hand signs became sloppy and slow. Naruto saw this and decided that it was time to end this skirmish since he still had a crazed Tanuki to deal with. Naruto pushed off his feet and shot towards Yuna, who just got to her last sign. However, before she was allowed to use her, Naruto was on her with his left arm surrounded in a shroud of wind. Just as the outstretched arm hit her neck, Naruto curled his arm around it while he stood behind her. Don't act like this is a glory or death mission, Yuna. You fought well but ran into someone with more chakra. Besides, you still want that date, right? Naruto whispered into her ear with a small smile as his Kijin no Yoroi flickered around his body. Yuna, who was the only one who heard his words, nodded slightly before slumping back against Naruto unconscious. Naruto eased the pressure around her neck and cut off his armor of the wind god. Thankfully Yuna gave up right away or else Naruto would have had to cut off the air to both of their bodies. Naruto waited for the medics to make their way towards them before he laid Yuna across the gurney. Taking note of Yuna's small smile, Naruto chuckled. Winner of the semi-final match by knockout, Naruto Namikaze Uzumaki Uchiha. Naruto ignored the proctor and the subsequent cheers from the crowd as he walked back towards the wall where Twilight was stuck to. With the chakra gone, he found his katana lying in a puddle. Picking it up and flourishing the water from the blade, Naruto walked back to the center of the field where Gaara was already waiting for him with his perpetual glare of a gaze. I have dealt with that annoying acid from your last opponent. As we agreed, you are on your own against that damned Tanuki. You better not lose because I will not permit myself to have a weak container. Naruto ignored the prideful and stubborn ramblings from his furry fox demon in favor of staring down Gaara with his Sharingan. Naruto could feel the unease that was rolling off of Gaara's person. It was almost like the auburn-haired Jinchuriki was conflicted due to the prospect of a fight. I got a Kyuubi. Just do whatever it is you do when you aren't helping me out with something. Naruto said casually before cutting the mental link just before the Kyuubi could get in a prideful shout that would most certainly end with an insult directed at him. Page Booth, your son has quite an impressive amount of control over the elements of fire and wind. That it could be even considered Jounin level. Inoki complimented Minato begrudgingly since it was pointless to deny just how impressive of a performance Naruto had put together on the field below. Minato smiled slightly while nodding his head subtly. Yes, Naruto has shown a great amount of promise just like Yuna had done with her. Just seeing the damage it could do is truly terrifying. Minato's personality made it much easier for him to return the compliment of another village's shinobi. Though he was very proud to see how far his son had come. Yet there was the twinge of guilt in his heart knowing that he had done it without his help, all because of a foolish mistake. Yes, your son has put on a truly impressive display. However, he is now going to fight my son who has had plenty of time to recover. I can't see how he could defeat Gaara. The Kazuki intoned with a small frown on his face, making it easy to think that he was disappointed by the outcome thus far. That's because your boy is the perfect shinobi, isn't that right, Kazuki Dono? A asked with a small smirk as he looked over to the serious-looking man who only shot the lightning shadow a momentary glance before closing his eyes and leaning back into his seat. After a moment he opened his eyes and watched Naruto and Gaara continue their standoff. Believe what you will. I was merely stating facts. The Kazuki retorted, doing his best to not voice any of the agitation he was feeling. He knew that was what the Raikage was fishing for and he would not be the one to give it to him. The Raikage scoffed at the very political answer that the Wind Shadow had given. This was the time that the Mizukage cut in, hoping to stem off yet another petty dispute between the Kage. Well, that may be true, Kazuki Dono. I still hope that Naruto will put on a wonderful display for the finals. Mei said confidently with a pleasant smile on her face when the two bickering Kage ceased their dispute. I certainly hope so, Mizukage Dono. I believe in him. Minato said with a larger smile as he waited to see what his son would do next. Each of his matches brought some form of interesting outcomes that weren't expected, and Minato saw no reason to believe this would be any different. Combat field. Mother wants your blood, Uzumaki. Gaara informed Naruto with his usual gravelly voice as he continued to stare down his raven-haired opponent. A moment later the sand that was contained inside of the auburn-haired shinobi's gourd roared from its place of containment. Naruto's Sharingan started to work furiously as he tried to discern the anomaly that was Gaara's first line of defense. Naruto's red eyes started to look for differences between the chakra sources around Gaara, all three of them. Naruto's lips curled up into a slight smirk as he figured something out, but that would come later. Well, there is quite the line from my blood. Naruto mused to himself with an almost bitter chuckle, getting a humorous caw from Susei through the soul link. Naruto made sure that Susei was on top of the stadium and away from Gaara, who was no doubt the biggest threat this tournament could produce. Naruto knocked himself out of his self-indulgence so he could focus on Gaara, who seemed to wait for him to respond. Naruto blew the low-hanging bang out of his face and gave Gaara a wry look. You are most certainly welcome to try. Gaara did not seem very amused by Naruto's flippant attitude towards his ominous demand, and neither was his mother. The sand began to clump in front of the one-tailed Jinchuriki right before everyone's eyes. Sand drizzle. Gaara, with his arms still furled over his chest, watched as the thick clusters of sand trounced towards the Hokage's son. Naruto closed his eyes for a moment before going through a series of hand signs and puffing out his chest. Opening his mouth, Naruto fired a series of small fireballs at the sand clusters, destroying them in the resulting small-scale explosions. Naruto created a shadow clone, and the two began to go through their own hand seals separately, with the original finishing before his clone. Fire release. Grand Fireball. From Naruto's mouth came a modest fireball that traveled towards Gaara, who looked disinterested at the feeble attempt to harm him. Wind release. Whirlwind fist. The wind then fed into the fiery ball, making it expand mid-flight. Gaara, who now registered Naruto's two that worked in collaboration as a threat, used his sand to create a wall to defend himself from the searing combination. Unseen to the rest of the living population in the area, Gaara grit his teeth as his sand held firm against Naruto's attempt. Breaking through the fire, Gaara's sand swarmed Naruto, who was forced to quickly substitute himself with a log or suffer the crushing demise that his substitution log had just suffered. The sand didn't even spare a moment as it flung itself at Naruto, who was forced to backpedal away from the persistent sand. Reaching past Twilight, which hung on his hip, Naruto gripped a handful of kunai and tossed them towards the motionless Gaara, but found himself to be frowning when the sand that was attacking him caught the kunai before they could get anywhere near his opponent. The sand sprung upwards and was moments from crashing down on Naruto when he cocked his fist back. A large amount of wind began to rush and whip around Naruto's fist as he harnessed the energy. Just as the sand began to start to fall towards him, Naruto thrusted his fist out and watched as the wind ripped through the sand and hit Gaara in the chin, making his head snap back from the force of the attack. The sand froze mid-motion before it rushed back towards Gaara to resume its defense of the Sunagakure Jinchuriki. Naruto noticed how ready the sand was to return to Gaara's defense, and it verified his belief in his earlier hypothesis. Gaara could feel the pain on his cheek from the blunt but effective wind-enhanced strike thrown by Naruto. He was not using his usual sand armor because the fight earlier in the day with Yujito took a surprising amount out of Gaara, and fixing then applying the armor would be very chakra taxing. Now his blood was boiling as Naruto threatened to end his existence, something he would not give anyone the pleasure of doing. Meanwhile, Shukaku was ranting on how Gaara needed to kill Naruto and take his blood. The One Tail's hatred for the Nine Tails came through, not that Gaara knew that was the reason for his mother's livid behavior. No. I refuse to forfeit my existence to you. I will kill you, and then your blood will saturate my sand, Uzumaki. Gaara roared with anger and rage, filling his usually void eyes as his sand began to stir violently around him. Naruto remained calm as he decided to try something invasive. Who is telling you that I wish to kill you? Who is telling you to take my blood, Gaara? Naruto asked with a calm tone as his Sharingan bore straight into Gaara, who returned the stare with a menacing glare of his own. Naruto knew the look, a look of hatred directed at those who saw him and apparently Gaara, as less than the dirt they walked on. Gaara paused momentarily from his bloodlust-induced frenzy and regarded Naruto with curiosity as he registered the two questions Naruto offered. My mother is the one who wants you to die so I may prove that I am alive with your blood. Gaara's slightly murderous answer was given in a calm voice, showing he saw no problems with it. Naruto nodded his head slowly as he continued to look at Gaara with no emotion on his face as he took in those words. Tell me of the woman who gave birth to you, Gaara. Naruto waited patiently for Gaara to give him an answer, while the crowd wondered just what was going on in Naruto's mind, Kage included. I am not sure. She died during my birth. Gaara answered truthfully as he wondered just where Naruto was going with this. Gaara even turned out Shukaku's urges to finish the job he started. Naruto nodded his head, taking Gaara's answer for what it was, the truth. Naruto figured that there was more to it than that, but didn't verbalize that suspicion. Gaara, do you know what these eyes of mine can see? Naruto asked while tapping his temple, getting Gaara to shake his head negatively. My eyes can see a chakra signature in the sand from your gourd. The chakra signature is very, and I do mean very, similar to your own. I believe that the mother you speak of is the one-tailed tanuki, Shukaku. Shukaku, the reason you are seen as an abomination by the people of your village, much like I am by the fools that live here. That sand that protects you is not the one-tail's doing, it is the will of your biological mother ingrained in the chakra that protects you. And from what I have seen, it will act to protect you without any effort on your part, but to attack you need to ask it to. After all, a mother will always protect their child while wishing it to stay away from violence. The stadium all paid rapt attention to Naruto's small explanation behind Gaara's sand shield, leaving Temari and Kankuro's jaws hanging, while the Kazekage wondered just how much Naruto's eyes could see. Gaara, who listened attentively, was reminded of something his uncle had told him on the night he passed away after trying to assassinate him. I can never love something like you, Gaara, because you took my sister away, however my sister will always love you because you are her son and she is your mother. That's love. Gaara, hearing Naruto's words, started to connect the dots that Naruto put in a line for him while remembering his uncle's words of the past. The situation created a powder keg of emotions inside of the unstable boy. Gripping the sides of his head and shouting no, Gaara found himself in search of answers. Come to me, Gaara. I will save you from the pain of this world. I will accept you. Shukaku manipulated his voice to that of a woman who was caring and loving. Hearing the soothing voice, Gaara nodded stiffly and soon his sand formed into a solid cocoon around him. An eye formed from the sand and glared at Naruto. Naruto glanced at the eye as did the rest of the people in the arena before returning his eyes towards the egg-shaped sand dome that concealed Gaara from the world. Naruto arched an eyebrow at the strange tactic. I hope he doesn't expect me to just watch him power himself up. Naruto murmured to himself as he went through 3 hand signs and brought his hand up to his mouth. Wind release. Drilling air bullets. 3 bullets of wind shot from Naruto's open mouth and ripped right through the sand defense like a flimsy piece of paper, sending Gaara out the back of the sand dome. Gaara got back onto his feet after being blasted by the air-based attack, with his shoulder bleeding from Naruto's last attack. Gaara glared at Naruto, but his eyes were no longer pale and void, but black with golden cross pupils. The black rings around his eyes were much darker now, and he had tanuki ears coming from his hair. Do not underestimate my desire to live. I will be alone in the world I create. The blood-chilling scream sent shivers down the genin who were former competitors, while looks of concern passed across the faces of every shinobi in the stadium. Naruto for the first time in the tournament visibly recoiled from the desperation in Gaara's voice. Throwing his arms out, Gaara's gourd of sand dropped off his back and pooled around his feet, rising past his knees. Naruto was forced to leap onto a wall as sand flooded the area around Gaara coming from each corner of the stadium. The sand quickly spun violently until it formed a tower that easily surpassed that of the stadium in height. After a few tense minutes, Naruto's expression quickly shifted to disbelief and shock as a figure started to crawl from the tower of sand. It can't be him. A bulky arm came from the wall of sand near Gaara's body, which was floating in the center of the sand tower, still visible. A head soon followed the emerging arm, marked with a strange pattern decorating both the arm and head. The head quickly had grown ears, a jagged mouth, and the same eyes that Gaara was currently displaying. The sight of a half-formed Shukaku roaring out, shaking the stadium, froze civilians and shinobi alike. The amount of bloodlust the creature was giving off was enough that someone could drown in it. The children in the audience were all shaking in fear at the sight of the sand monster. Flexing the claw at the end of its lone appendage, the Shukaku gave a menacing grin as its stomach and upper body became stable out of the grains of sand. Gaara glared down at Naruto as his mother made her appearance behind Gaara, like a spirit materializing behind its avatar. Naruto could see that both Biju and Jinchuriki had eyes that were glazed over in a state of semi-consciousness. You gave up a mother's love and protection for the power of a monster that wishes to control you. Then I will be your eyes, Gaara. Page Booth. A sprung to his feet as he stared at the looming figure of the spirit of the desert, ready to jump down at a moment's notice. While not in Kumo, A still had the instincts of a village leader when a calamity struck, and that was to save as many people as possible. May's hands clenched around the arms of her chair. She glanced at the half-formed Biju that rose above the arena, casting an ominous shadow over the area. The Terumi woman still had a healthy fear of the beasts after having to deal with the Sanbi on the occasions that Yugura let it take charge during skirmishes on the battlefield. Mei too sprung to her feet with a Noki as the head of Shukaku looked around the arena. The Ichibi. Minato's eyes hardened as he stared down the beast that was looking at his village with too much curiosity. Silently he was forming a plan of attack in case the one-tail broke out of the containment of the arena, where it would run rampant in the village. The only Kage who was entirely calm despite Shukaku's appearance was Kazekage, Gaara's father. The wind shadow could see that this was the partial takeover and took a heavy sigh as he thought to himself. That boy was able to stop Gaara just before he could give the reins to Shukaku. Gaara is in control, but will he show control? Combat field. Naruto dropped back onto the ground and looked at the large demon that was now fighting with his opponent against him. I have to fight a Biju now. This is just fantastic. I am going to need something with a lot of firepower to put that thing down. Naruto groaned, which proved to be the wrong thing to do because thanks to the sound the Ichibi found him and snarled at him, making Naruto scowl. He was hoping to be able to come up with a plan, but apparently he wouldn't be able to do so. Lifting its one arm up, Shukaku glared down at Naruto. Ninjin, I know I said I wouldn't help you, but you need to move and put down that runt before he is given complete control. Kyuubi ordered Naruto to pay attention once he had felt Shukaku's familiar chakra spike. While Shukaku was the weakest of the tailed beasts, he was still a tailed beast. I use Amaki, let me see your blood. Wind release. Drilling air bullet. Unlike when Naruto used the Shukaku slammed his arm into his gut, creating the same yet as was much larger and faster. Naruto saw the fierce gale of wind dripping through the field as it approached him, showing that maybe speed was genetic as he sped away from where he was standing, avoiding Tanuki's first strike. Naruto was forced to get closer to the large sand monster as it continued spitting tornado force winds at him. Reaching out with his massive claw, Shukaku swiped at Naruto, making the raven-haired shinobi leap to the side in a hasty retreat. The ground was left with 3 scars cutting deep into the soil like shallow canyons. Shukaku let out a dark chuckle as he watched Naruto continue to run away from him like the insignificant rat he was perceived as. Jumping on the back of the massive Tanuki's palm, Naruto was flung high into the air when it ripped its claw from the earth. Naruto, now even with Tanuki's face, took a deep breath before exhaling. Wind release. Drilling air bullets. Naruto shouted as 2 spheres of wind slammed into each of Shukaku's eyes, making the monster cry out in annoyance. Acting on instinct, Shukaku flicked his arm out as a defensive mechanism for his temporary blindness. Naruto had no chance to dodge while in midair and was sent careening into the few trees that were left. Naruto cried out in pain as he felt his shoulder dislocate and his arm break when he landed on the ground. Naruto willed himself back to his feet and glared at the monster that was gripping its face in annoyance. The raven-haired crow summoner had to admit that Shukaku was very sturdy. Naruto began to do seals with one hand but was forced to repeat the process to do them properly. Fire release. Majestic flame destroyer. Naruto exhaled, shooting a wide wall of flames toward Shukaku. Unfortunately for the Sharingan wielder, the sand demon had just regained his vision and laughed at the measly Naruto had used, at least in the sand spirit's perspective. Naruto's body slumped forward as he watched his best fire flood the air and travel towards Tanuki's face. Naruto heard the laughing of his opponent's tenant and knew that it would not be enough. Ha ha. I love watching how worms try and cling to their miserable existences. Wind release. Seldom sandstorm. The one-tail blew out a long breath that contained particles of sand within the devastating gust. The earth particles in the fire easily swallowed up the impressive fire attack like it was a dying ember. Naruto tried to brace himself with his one good arm as the wind picked him up and deposited him into the wall. Naruto pried himself from the wall and dropped onto his feet with a pained groan, his head bleeding and an arm hanging limp at his side. I'm almost out of chakra and this guy is just getting stronger. Naruto thought with a hint of desperation as Shukaku continued to laugh, obviously not seeing Naruto as any kind of threat. I have to try that. Naruto got to his feet and created a cage bunshin to assist him in his next move. Naruto slowly built a sphere of wind in his palm that soon started to twist faster as it gained speed. Naruto grit his teeth as he tried his best to keep the shape of the vacuum sphere with only one hand. The sphere floated out into the air just in front of Naruto where soon a ball of flames hit the sphere, courtesy of a clone. But the flames and sphere didn't explode, instead a supercharged flame was created in spherical form. Now for the last touch. Naruto told himself, panting heavily as some blood dripped into his mouth. Positioning his pointer and middle fingers so that they were aimed at the self-containing fire sphere, Naruto released a small bolt of lightning that fused easily with the sphere of fire. The cackling was heard when the lightning coursed around the sphere, getting Shukaku to stop laughing and look at the attack as was the rest of the arena. The air that the sphere manipulated around it carried the massive bomb towards Gaara. Shukaku, who was too busy dealing with curiosity, realized what was happening and curled his body around Gaara, trying to save his container from death while believing he could handle the worms. Please finish this. Collaboration technique. Judgment of the scorned. Naruto limped towards the edge of the arena and braced himself for the inevitable impact of what would be his last attack, one way or the other. The next second, a truly massive explosion shook the entire stadium and the blocks around it, with the tremor rivaled by a massive shift in the Earth's core when the sphere of fire and lightning-enhanced wind expanded, releasing all of the energy stored in the technique at once. The only sound that could describe what was heard would be the sound of thunder accompanying a lightning bolt. The people in the stands cried out in shock when the strength of the shockwave picked some of them up from their seats. Even the cage had to use a startling amount of chakra to brace themselves from the force of Naruto's technique. No one in the arena could see a thing as a bright light blinded everyone in the arena after the jutsu's detonation. It took a few minutes for the light to fade and return visibility to the arena as a wind blew away the dust that was kicked into the air from the explosion. The arena looked on in awe as the once full field was reduced to nothing more than one large, smoldering crater. The only places that were unaffected were the fringes of the field where Naruto and the proctors were standing. Knowing the events of his were done with, Naruto dropped into the crater. That wasn't even its full potential. If I had both arms, then I could have made the vacuum sphere more refined and more powerful. Naruto got to the center of the crater where Gaara's unconscious body was lying. Trying to get close to his fellow container, a wave of sand was what greeted him. I was just checking on him. I have no plans to harm your son any further. It is impressive what a mother's love can stand, and that includes death. Naruto said, looking at the sand that still floated around Gaara like a veil. Naruto ignored that he was called the winner and he was being lavished with shears. Gaara, you have love from a mother even while she is dead, while I was given nothing. Naruto muttered bitterly as his body started to shut down. Just when he thought he would collapse on the ground, Naruto was caught by the sand that was protecting Gaara and was lowered to the ground. Naruto could feel an odd warmth coming from the sand, and just before he went unconscious, he could have sworn he heard a woman's voice. You're not alone. A pair of bleary blue eyes opened up and blinked once, trying to find its bearings as they found themselves looking up at a white ceiling and a panel of light that was directly over them. Naruto tried to stir himself awake but found that he could only move his left arm freely. Oh, that's right, I broke an arm against Gaara. Without thinking or really caring, Naruto released a tired sigh as he ran his free hand through his hair. Now, out of the slight daze one comes into after a period of slumber, Naruto could hear mumblings and one loud shout. He's awake. Naruto groaned in annoyance when he felt the weight of another person clinging onto half of his body. Naruto was relieved that the human projectile managed to keep away from his injured arm. Glancing down, Naruto could see the red hair of Naomi filling his vision and let a slight scowl play on his face. He still was not very fond of people touching him without his consent, even if it was Naomi and her emotional outbursts. Shifting around slightly, Naruto's eyebrow began to twitch in annoyance when he found that he couldn't free his arm from Naomi's vice-like grip. "Get off of me." Naruto hissed at Naomi, getting the girl mentioned to tense up as she realized what she had done in the heat of the moment. Naomi quickly got off of Naruto with a sheepish grin as she rubbed the back of her neck. Naruto let out another sigh as he found himself too tired to even be angry at his emotion-ruled sister. Naruto took the moment to glance around and saw that not only was Naomi present, but so was Narumi, Kushina and Minato. His family. Naruto closed his eyes for a moment, knowing that he had no choice but to deal with them, seeing as he was clearly hospitalized. Sitting up, Naruto watched as his other sister walked over to the side of his bed wearing a small smile. "How are you, Naruto-kun?" Narumi asked, genuinely checking on who she thought to be a friend. Unlike the rest of her family, Narumi didn't believe she had the right to ask Naruto to consider her family, but she hoped they could be friends at the very least. Naruto gave Narumi a questioning glance, not understanding why she would be asking that. Narumi picked up on this and elaborated for Naruto's sake. "You have been out for 3 days." Naruto's blue eyes widened momentarily at that piece of information, because the last time he had been out of commission for more than a day were the days he was trained by Mihik, Itachi, and Mifune all in the same day. "I have been better," Naruto said quietly, since it was quite obvious his arm was broken and in a cast while he was feeling drained in the chakra department. Narumi nodded her head, smiling at Naruto's answer, since he didn't try to shun or keep her out. "What about the promotion ceremony?" Naruto asked the room, looking for an answer. "We decided to hold it a week after the finals. After the final display the cages, and I decided it would be better to give everyone a cool down period. You still have 4 days before the ceremony." Minato told Naruto what the rest of the genin had been told the day after exams minus he and Gaara. Naruto just nodded his head. "It looks like you are following your Uzumaki genetics, Naruto-kun, already taking care of Biju?" Kushina chided Naruto, hoping to make light of the rather tense last match that her son was forced to take part in. Naruto smirked at his mother since he didn't mind being called an Uzumaki. Kushina's smile took a rather serious turn as she added on to her earlier statement. "Naruto, what was that Fuinjutsu you used in your second match?" Naruto looked at Kushina blankly, then he glanced at the Hokage with an equally blank stare that made him frown sadly. "There will be a council meeting, will there not?" Naruto asked, seemingly disregarding the entire question Kushina had asked. Minato looked surprised for a second before letting out a small chuckle. "Yes, I have received a request to hold a council meeting the day after the promotion ceremony with regards to what you have revealed to the world during the exams." Minato informed everyone in the room with a small sigh, wondering what the old fools wanted this time. Silently, the blonde Hokage wondered why he let Hiruzen convince him to keep his advisors in their positions. "That's what I thought. I will explain everything there since I do not feel like telling this story multiple times," Naruto said, looking back at Kushina, getting a nod from the Uzumaki woman. Naruto slumped back into his bed, looking back up at the ceiling with half-lidded eyes, showing just how tired he was. "Now if you don't mind, I still feel quite exhausted." The visitors all nodded their heads in understanding and bid Naruto their own form of goodbye before leaving the room. Naruto closed his eyes and almost immediately fell back into a comfortable sleep. Naruto opened his eyes yet again. This time there was no annoying light welcoming him back to the world of the waking. Naruto looked out the window and saw that a crescent moon was high in the night sky. Naruto glanced to his left and saw a person that he did not earlier lying in a bed much like he was. It was his final opponent, Gaara Sabaku, and he was looking right back at Naruto. "Why are you so strong?" Gaara asked Naruto. His voice was usually soft, almost like he was unsure about his own convictions. Naruto looked away from the auburn-haired boy and out into the moon's ethereal surface as he came up with his answer. Gaara watched as Naruto's blue eyes peered out at the moon, waiting for the words of the shinobi who had proven himself to be stronger than he was. "Long ago I was told that a person becomes strong when they have something worth fighting for. Ever since that day I have fought to protect the idea of a village where I can live without having to worry about the hell that is isolation. I fight for the ones who saved me from hell, even if they don't need me to protect them." Naruto spoke passionately as he continued to stare out at the moon. "Something to protect? I don't think I can ever have something like that." Gaara spoke with regret filling his voice as he remembered the way he acted when he thought his way was the only one to become strong. He had walked over corpses instead of building bonds with the people he had come into contact with. "You have a family to start with. There is no need to complicate things, Gaara." Naruto spoke with a sagely wisdom, and in truth Gaara was almost like Naruto's student. Gaara took Naruto's words to heart and even nodded his head, getting Naruto to smile. If that is not enough, then I will fight for you and you can fight for me. We won't be alone. Naruto said, happily repeating the line that a woman had spoken to him before he went unconscious. Gaara's eyes expanded in surprise as he looked over to the grinning Naruto with a small smile of his own. Thank you, my friend. Sure thing, Gaara. Chapter 12. Break of the Red Dawn. Once again, Naruto found himself staring up at the ceiling of his hospital room with an obvious disinterest. Naruto looked around the room where the only color that was present in bulk was white, which only reflected the light. Naruto silently wondered why they couldn't use a more muted color that would make it easier on the eyes of the patients, which included him for now. Going over a checklist that included a separated shoulder and a broken arm, Naruto was pleased that his chakra levels had stabilized. Naruto was sure that even with the advantage of his eyes, he had no qualms about not having to battle with Biju for some time. He was just not ready. The fledgling shinobi knew that the demonic tanuki was not at full power, and he still tossed him around like a ragdoll. Then there were still 8 more of those creatures, each with more potential to utterly eradicate entire hidden villages out there, a sobering thought. There was no doubt many people would be impressed by Naruto's victory over the Ichibi, however to Naruto's high standards it wasn't worth it if he was hospitalized for 3 going on his 4 days. It was a blow to Naruto's pride more than anything else. I really hate hospitals. Naruto muttered with a small frown, using his voice as a way to release the frustration he was feeling about the situation as a whole. I find that is a sentiment shared by all young shinobi. Yet when you get older you will find hospitals as a blessing from Kami in disguise. Age often dampens the enthusiasm you youngsters possess. An elderly voice added in from the right side of the bed. Naruto knew the voice of his surrogate grandfather anywhere, but what surprised a young Uchiha was that the old man was able to get so close without him even noticing. Apparently the look Naruto was giving Hiruzen showed his disbelief because it gave the elderly Sarutobi a reason to chortle at the expression adorned on Naruto's face. Naruto-kun, I am known as the god of shinobi for a reason. There is no need to be so surprised. I would have been more surprised if you had managed to sense me. Hiruzen spoke wearing a teasing grin as he reached behind him and came back with a red fruit. Apple. Hiruzen offered with a grandfatherly smile that made Naruto respond in kind. Naruto took the apple with his good hand and observed the apple for a few moments before chuckling, getting Hiruzen to arch an eyebrow. These are supposed to keep the doctors away, but I suppose it is too late for that, no? That piece of humor gave Hiruzen a good laugh, as well as Naruto bit into the flesh of the apple, putting some nourishment into his stomach. So old man. Whatever Naruto was about to say was cut off as Hiruzen's hand blurred from vision and landed on the top of Naruto's head with a swift chop. Naruto's eyes scrunched close in pain as he gave a small cry of pain. Opening his eyes, Naruto glared at the former Hokage with his blue eyes both angry but joyful. What was that for? I always call you that. I know Naruto-kun is just fun to be able to do that. Hiruzen said with another hearty laugh as Naruto gave a small mock scowl. Hiruzen just ignored Naruto's fake protest, getting Naruto to mumble affection insults about his age. Hiruzen, now done with having his small amount of fun, looked back at Naruto, giving him his full attention. Right. Well, as I was going to say. Where were you, old man? I couldn't find you anywhere in the stands during the fights. Naruto asked of the former Fire Shadow, getting the Sarutobi clan head to nod since he was not present during the fighting, but he was able to see the replays and hear the buzz around the village. That's because I wasn't. I and a few other Sarutobi clan members as my guards were on a political mission to Sunagakure, where there have been some border tensions as of late. Hiruzen said after finishing his own apple since he couldn't smoke in the hospital, seeing as it would be detrimental for a patient's health. Naruto nodded his head since Konoha had always tried to be peaceful, or so it was said, so it made sense to send a powerful shinobi to try and curb the violence before it could truly begin. Putting away such dark matters for another time. I came upon an interesting piece of information saying that you had defeated Shukaku in the final fight of the exams. That is no small feat. Hiruzen spoke absent-mindedly while stroking his chin, but there was no small amount of pride in his voice. Naruto could feel his heart swell when he heard Hiruzen's indirect praise of his skills. Naruto remembered what Mihik had told him about an inflated ego and decided to try and play what he had done as unimpressive because he knew that it was luck that Shukaku wasn't fully out and about in the fight. Not really, I mean the one tail wasn't even fully formed and it was still smacking me around like a child. Naruto admitted, clenching his fist around the bedsheet that laid over him. Hiruzen was looking out the window at the village but nodded his head, agreeing with Naruto's honest assessment, but he thought it would be for the best if he pointed out just how impressive it actually was. That may be true, but remember that you are only a genin, Naruto-kun, and for a genin to defeat a half-formed Biju is nothing to scoff at. Hiruzen praised a younger shinobi, getting Naruto to give him a vulpine grin. Then there is that explosion you set off in the center of the arena. Maybe that was a bit excessive, don't you think? Before Naruto could try and dispute the somewhat overwhelming praise, the door to his hospital room opened up and in stepped Shizune holding a medical chart that she was going over. Bringing her eyes up, she let out a small gasp and bowed respectively to Hiruzen. I apologize, Hiruzen-sama, I was not aware you were seeing Naruto-san. Hiruzen laughed lightly while waving off the medic's apology, not all that bothered or concerned by her appearance. Nonsense, Shizune-chan, you are just doing your job. By all means do what you came to do. Hiruzen stood up and moved to stand near the door as Shizune went to do a routine checkup on Naruto, who was clearly annoyed by this. This boy can use 3 chakra natures at such a tender age. That accompanied with his Sharingan and defeat of Shukaku with time and the right hand, he can easily take the title of God of Shinobi from me. I can't think of a better shinobi to hand it to either. Taking a step back from the bed and holding the chart she brought with her to her chest, Shizune gave Naruto a warm smile. Everything checks out, Naruto-san. You are free to go when you are ready. Naruto nodded and looked around and saw that he had a set of clothing already folded up on a chair at the foot of the bed. Thank you for taking care of me, Shizune-san. Naruto thanked his caretaker politely since he never had any problems with a woman. Unlike her master, Shizune had always been kind towards him and helped him out whenever he and she were in the same place and he needed it. Shizune nodded and excused herself to go and return to her duties within the hospital. Well, Naruto-kun, why don't you get dressed and then we can go and get some ramen? Hiruzen said happily as he exited the room, already knowing Naruto would be wearing a large grin on his face. Naruto sighed happily when he found the couch in his home to be just as comfortable as it was before he had left it at the beginning of the Chunin exams. Making sure his recovering arm was not in any position to be harmed, Naruto allowed himself time to relax outside of the hospital setting. After taking a deep breath, Naruto allowed his eyes to close and not a moment later he felt an additional weight come down upon his head. Not even needing to open his eyes to know what was happening, Naruto smiled. Hello Susei, it is good to see you. Susei rustled around on top of Naruto's head, making sure to get as comfortable as possible within his raven-shaded hair. Ah, finally you are out of that terrible place, Naruto-kun. I was so sick of having to wait out there. Naruto chuckled lightly at his partner's words, but was glad to hear he had someone waiting for him to return. Naruto could feel through the soul link just how happy Susei was to have him back, and it was truly something he had come to cherish over the past month. Naruto knew he would never regret choosing Susei to be the one he was bonded with. Finally we get some time to relax. Sitting on your shoulder has nothing resting on your head. Susei chirped constantly as she lounged on top of the Konoha shinobi's head without a care in the world. Naruto smiled wider, but then it took a small twist into a grin. Is that all I am to you, Susei, a glorified perch? Naruto asked, feigning to be hurt by Susei's words as he tried to keep a straight face. Susei wasn't going to be perturbed by her partner's antics and instead just cawed, more or less telling Naruto to get over it. Naruto gave his partner a small laugh before he reached up and petted her with his knuckle gently as he eased into the comfort of his couch. It didn't take too long before Naruto found his breathing starting to even out and rest coming to his tired body as Susei did the same on top of the sleeping Uchiha's head. Naruto opened his eyes again, but this time he found only a lingering darkness. Confused by his new surroundings, Naruto flared his chakra assuming he was under an illusion, but the darkness still lingered. The only added effect of using his chakra was that Naruto's Sharingan roared to life, the red seemingly glowing in the infinite darkness. Reaching up, Naruto also found that Susei was not on his head. Naruto took a few steps in the direction he was facing, but there was still not a single sign indicating light was even existent. Growing more and more frustrated at the infinite amount of darkness, Naruto shouted into the distance. What is this? This is what you see. A voice echoed across the infinite plane of darkness, getting Naruto to tense and immediately fall into a combat-ready stance. Naruto glanced around him, checking each direction for the source of the voice. Finding nothing, Naruto couldn't help but scowl at the situation he found himself in. Who are you? Naruto demanded, his body still ready to deal with any possible threat that dared appear before him. Swerving around when he could have sworn something brushed past him, Naruto glared at the darkness. What do you mean this is what I see? I can see much more than a bunch of darkness. Naruto challenged, starting to lose his usual calm demeanor much quicker than he would normally. There is the arrogance that plagues you. You have never truly seen the world, Naruto. You may have seen more than those around you, but you can't see it all. The voice returned with a scathing assessment of what Naruto was, getting Kyuubi's pseudo-container to scowl deeper in the darkness. Naruto felt that assessment was so far from what the truth was about him. Arrogance is what has sunk its fangs into Sasuke, not I, and there you go saying I can't see, but my eyes are far from average. Naruto protested heatedly at seemingly nothing, but he felt as if he was being watched, evaluated. It irritated him that he was still in a helpless position after all he had done to get stronger. That statement is inconsequential. You see just as much as you did when you were a child yearning for the attention of your family. The voice continued pushing on sensitive subjects, and the cold tone it used was not helping Naruto's dwindling patience either. Feeling his blood boil, Naruto glared ahead of him with his Sharingan revolving in each eye as a result of that anger. Fire release. Grand fireball. Naruto shouted angrily as he fired a massive ball of fire out into the field of darkness, hoping to burn down the annoying voice that was questioning him and his being. Naruto watched as the fireball was swallowed up by the darkness like it never came to be in the first place, not even illuminating the darkness that filled the space around Naruto before being taken by the darkness. Perhaps that isn't your fault, however. Maybe the people around you are to blame. A prime example as to what I am saying is your two senseis, Mihiko and Itachi. Where before the voice was directly addressing Naruto, it sounded as if it was making a simple, speculative statement. Naruto's body began to tremble with anger as the voice insulted two of his most precious people. I won't sit here and let you talk poorly about them. They saved me from that hell of a childhood. What would you know about any of that? You won't even show your face, coward. Naruto shouted, not being able to take the bad mouthing that was being dished out to his senseis, especially when they weren't present to defend themselves. I have nothing more to tell someone who isn't listening. Enjoy the darkness that clouds the world, and when you come back maybe those eyes of yours will be clear. The even voice said, dismissing Naruto, leaving him to his own thoughts. Naruto stood there demanding the voice return and give him a straight answer, but to no avail. Naruto shot up from the couch, his eyes opening in a hurry as he gasped for air after the experience he had just taken part in. A small bead of sweat made its way down the side of the young shinobi's temple as his breathing started to calm down. Looking around and finding himself back inside of his apartment complex, Naruto allowed himself to relax. Looking outside of the window, Naruto saw the sun was a little lower than it was earlier, but not ready to go down, not really giving him an accurate time frame for how long he was asleep. Slumped back into the couch, his muscles relaxing from their tense state, Naruto used his good hand to move the hanging bang from his eye. Naruto sighed softly as he looked out the window, thinking about what he had just experienced. Who was that and why did he keep asking me what I can see? I can see things just fine. This world is corrupted and unjust. Naruto took a deep breath as images of his childhood threatened to flood his consciousness. Naruto took twilight from its resting place next to him and rose up into the air, getting the sunlight to gleam off the metal, making it shine brilliantly. In the reflection on the metal, Naruto's eyes could be seen shifting from an azure blue to a bloody red. With his Sharingan spinning as he stared deeply into the metal, Naruto's hand tightened around the sword. I'll use my strength to fix those problems, at least in this village. And maybe on a grander scale. Naruto added in when he actually thought about the